Richard Harwood, president and founder of the Harwood Institute. You've been in this work for 35 years, devoting your career to vitalizing the nation in some of our hardest hit communities, transforming some of the world's largest organizations with your leadership trainings, and reconnecting communities, because that I really feel is at the core of what your work is doing. You've been recruited to work in some of the most challenging situations, from Newtown to various difficulties that we need to come back together as a community. You've been on media outlets, you've done a multitude of podcasts, you've written one of your reports that you have written that we want to dive into a little bit is the Civic, a Civic report on why polarization is misdiagnosed. Like, we need to dive into that because that's kind of where we are right now. And of course, we need to talk about your newest book, The New Civic Path Forward, Restoring Our Belief in One Another in Our Nation. So, without further ado, Rich, I'd love to hear a little bit of your why. How did you get into this work? What triggered you to say, this is my calling? Because you've been in this work for quite a bit of time now. So, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, great to be with you, Mary. Good to be with you, Josh. Thanks for having me. You know, I started the Institute when I was 27 years old, which is about 38 years ago now. And honestly, I did it for four reasons. One is that all sort of conspired to lead me to this place. One is that, by the time I was 23, I'd worked on 20 political campaigns. The last one, I was an aide to a presidential candidate. I love politics. I thought I would go into politics. I thought I would run for office. But so many of those campaigns, while I liked the candidates, were simply about dividing people and winning at any cost. That was back in the 80s. Things have only gotten worse. I worked for two nonprofits that I'm still in touch with. They had wonderful missions, but too many of my peers and too many nonprofits were unwilling to get dirt under their fingernails and do what I believe was the hard work we needed to do. I believe too many were living off of soft money and not creating the impact that they profess to be creating. Third, I'm a person of faith, and my faith calls me to do this work each and every day. And then lastly, when I was born, I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis in 1960. That was a death sentence. My parents were told I had 3 to 5 years to live. At one point, the doctor turned to my mother and said, "Face it, he's a lemon." I learned at a really early age what it feels like to have your dignity stripped from you, to not feel seen and heard, to feel invisible, and to watch my parents, who tried their best but just were overwhelmed by what was happening with me. I'm told that they would keep me out of the hospital until 12:01 at night because they couldn't afford the extra day. So all of these things, Mary, honestly, each and every day, these things that formed my why really guide the work that we're doing and the work that the Institute has sought to do over the last 38 years.
Okay, that is an amazing journey. So you're starting your career quite young at 21. How did you start? Because as Josh shared with you earlier, a lot of our focus is helping candidates and nonprofits get into it. So how did you get started? Let's go back that far, and then we'll pull it forward.
Yeah. Well, when I was working on the presidential campaign, we were taking a beating, and I literally came up with this idea sitting in my office there, and then started to talk to people about it. And, it's interesting. Every person I talked to, including my parents, told me not to do this. I'm a rebellious person. That just caused me to be more rebellious and want to do it. When I started, I didn't start, so many people start things with the idea of what they're going to create, and they simply want to scale it. I actually started with 8 questions, 8 vectors that I put up on a whiteboard and said, and they all dealt with, and they all came out of those 4 things I just told you about. What engenders hope in people? Authentic hope. What are the kinds of leaders we need in society that can bring us together? Something I know you and Josh are interested in. What are the kinds of organizations that can be catalytic and help us move forward? what does it mean for change to take root and spread in ways that have staying power? And what are the ways in which communities can be for all people, not just some of us? That's still a challenge, I think, in America today. And again, everyone said to me, look, if you're going to do this, be smart about it and just pick one of those. And I
Yeah.
said,
Focus. Yeah.
by focusing that narrowly, you pull apart the meaning and relevance of these different questions and the ways in which they interact and their interdependencies. And it's their interdependencies that actually are at what's at issue in society today. And the more we fragment things, the more we silo things, the more we pull them apart, the more we actually diminish the meaning of what we're trying to do, and importantly, how we're going to move forward. Last thought on this. When I started, and this you used the word journey a few moments ago, I think of the 38 years that we've been doing this work now as a journey. That it's a journey to gain insights and understanding and to innovate around the meaning of each and all of these questions that I started with, and obviously we've added others along the way, so that we can figure out how society can actually work for all of us, not some of us, how we can ensure that each individual, that their dignity is uplifted and honored. Dignity is a birthright. It's not something you earn like respect. And that we build the kinds of leaders and organizations and networks, the kind of civic culture that enable us to come together amid our real differences, figure out what we want to do, and figure out how we can move forward together. So that's really sort of the how this got started and really still what we're up to.
Yeah, this work is so important because I talk to candidates about this, I talk to nonprofits about this. One of the reasons in states or around the country where you don't see much political engagement is because candidates will roll out their campaign, they'll work hard in the communities, and then they roll up the carpet, is what I can
Yes.
say. And the
Yes.
work needs to continue. And that's the big question that everybody's asking about Mandani's campaign is 100,000 volunteers who showed up in community because they wanted to see change and they were inspired by hope of what that campaign was offering. The question is, what do you do with all those 100,000 volunteers to keep them engaged in their community
I
to see
think
the
we
change
see
they
them.
wanted to? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we see them as partners in the work.
Yeah.
I think too many politicians, as you said, and this was true when I started. It's true 10 years, 10 years in. It was true 20 years in. It's true 30 years in. Now it's true 40 years in, which is, the rap on candidates and politicians is they only show up when they want something, meaning a vote or money. And then once they get one of those two or both, they disappear again until they need something again. And we wonder why there's little trust between politicians or candidates and the public. They make promises that they know they can't keep and they never should have made. And they contribute to the skepticism and cynicism in society, and now the dashed hope that so many people have. As I work in communities all across the country, including in Indiana, where you are, Mary, and Pennsylvania, Josh, where you are, too many people have told me they've been sold a bill of goods that haven't been fulfilled. Too many people in both places where you're coming from have had to experience transitions in their economies and therefore in their lives. We've promised them all sorts of support and transition, and then it never materializes. So what I would say is, if I were running for office today, or if I were advising someone running for office today, I would say, if you're only planning on showing up to ask for votes and money, please don't do it. You're doing more harm than good. If you mobilize 100,000 volunteers or 20 volunteers, you now have the capability to engage with these folks as partners, because government can't do everything for us. We need to do some things ourselves as well, in addition to what government does. And so there is an opportunity here to create a basis for shared responsibility in society and to demonstrate that we together need to create the kind of future that we want.
Yeah.
Right.
Well said.
And I think that and maybe this is just a cynical outlook on life that my therapist needs to work on better, but I think that in most people in the world are just trying to get something in the civic world in general. They're out trying to get something. I think in the political world it's very obvious, right? It's votes or money, right? It's so obvious. And I think that other places like a for-profit system can be a little more subtle about it. Like it's a little easier to pretend that it's not a transactional relationship. You know, like I will give you this thing or I will like, and we can be more subtle
Yeah.
about it. But the reality is we're doing the same thing. And so I think what we need to do as candidates is not, I'm not a candidate, but I think what we need to do as like politicians, as a political party, is we either need to pretend better, which is not what I'm encouraging, but we need to fulfill those promises that we're making. So if you're
Yeah.
going to go out there and make promises, then you need to actually follow through on those promises that you're making.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the first order of business probably should be get your therapist on the phone so we can talk to them in this conversation. And then we
Yeah.
can maybe
I'm going to call up Amber right now and see if she's
it could be
available.
a
Yeah.
twofer. This conversation could
Yeah.
be a twofer for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, as you were talking, Josh, I was thinking, what is it that people, because you were talking about like what people are looking for. And so I was thinking like, so what is it that people really want? Well, they want to be seen and heard. They want to know that what matters to them matters to someone else. They want to know, there's an old country song, the refrain of which is, I can't see me in your eyes anymore, which means that people want to see their realities reflected. It doesn't mean what people don't want is for, or expect, is for every candidate or politician to agree with them. But what they do want is an explanation of why someone has made the choices they've made. What they do want is follow through on what you've promised. They don't expect that you're going to be able to fulfill all your promises, nor do they expect that all the change that you said you wanted to help create will materialize. Everyone is smarter than that. We know that we're in a heap of trouble. We know these problems took a long time to develop, and we know it sure the hell is going to take us a while to get out of it. But we just want to know we're on the right trajectory, moving in a more hopeful direction. So if I were someone running for office listening to this podcast, I would say take a deep breath and think about some basic things. Do you believe that people should be seen and heard? Do you believe that what matters to them should matter somehow in your campaign? Do you believe or that you owe some explanation for why you're going in a different direction? Do you believe that the promises you're making have a chance? Maybe they lay out a vision, but that you have a way forward. Do you believe that you have some responsibility to provide an explanation back to people? Do you believe that that people want more than anything a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, that we're in something together? Politics doesn't reflect any of those things today, by and large. And so what I would say is if you want to run and if you want to win, because I like to win, then you ought to be thinking deeply about what it really means to operate within the public realm and what your real obligations and responsibilities are and why. You asked me the very first question is, why are you doing this work? I would say to the person running for office, why are you really running? Why? And then ask them why again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I was just doing a training this weekend down in on the other side of Indianapolis, a candidate training. And Josh and I talk with all the time. It's not about you. And I think candidates need to flip the script because Josh and I will review campaign launch videos and they're trying to sell themselves. And we constantly say, it's not about you. It's not about you. Get the I statement out of everything that you're saying. And one of the things that we focused on this weekend, and this is where the work begins, that you're in the work that parallels what we talked about, was you need to understand your community. In order for you to deliver on your community and to get their votes and build their trust and bring back the hope and create the vision, You need to know what your community wants. And I
Yes.
know that's where a lot of your work begins, because that's the assignment I gave my crew. I said, I gave them 7 worksheets, and, just to basically think about it, get in your community, because we have to stop having our candidates just roll out a website. These are my platforms. These are what I'm pushing forward. Get on the bus. It's not how it works. So talk to
Yeah.
me how you dive into community.
Yes.
Well,
I
and I
think,
really love, sorry, not to cut you off, that seen heard quote that you
Yeah.
have. And I don't want us to lose that in the mix of this. You've said it multiple times, but that seen, heard, valued is, my wife's a therapist, so that's why I make all those therapist jokes too. Seen, heard, valued is a therapist phrase that gets used all the time. And I think that that is a huge piece. We've talked about it before with Obama when he went into the Midwest. And I love that picture of him sitting in a booth in a diner with some lady talking about issues she had. When I worked on the Shapiro campaign, they were trying to get African American voters in Philly on board, and it was literally just him talking with people in Philadelphia, because the thing we were just trying to get was people to feel seen and heard.
yeah.
So I think that that is something I don't want our candidates, if you get one single thing from the million pieces of knowledge Rich has already dropped so far, it's that seen heard piece. Your community needs to be seen and heard by you.
Right.
Sorry for
No,
cutting you off.
no, thanks for that, Josh. Then the question is, well, what does it mean to see and hear people? Right? And I think here's the dilemma that I think a lot of people make, both in politics and in community work, is first of all, they say, I want to see and hear people, but then when they actually get with people, they do all the talking. So that's a problem. But I just need to name that because it happens each and every day, right? And they want to tell them all the proposals and plans they have. It's basically a dog and pony show. So that doesn't work. There are times for that, but not in terms of seeing and hearing people. Second challenge is that they go and ask people about the problems in their lives. And we all have problems in our lives. But what your wife, Josh, will tell you, I'm sure, when she works with people, is that people don't want to simply fix problems, nor do they want to be fixed by someone else. People are trying to create something in their lives. People are trying to create something with their families. People are trying to create something in their communities, in this society. So we actually have to change the questions we're asking people. I think we need to start with, what are your aspirations for your life and community? And that, those aspirations are not utopian visions when you ask someone about aspirations, nor are they simply about hopes and dreams. So please don't substitute hopes and dreams for aspirations. Aspirations come from your gut. They're things that matter to you in your life and in your connection to other people. They are typically actionable, doable, and achievable over time. They're not pie in the sky things. And so if we can understand what people's aspirations are, we can begin to understand where they want to go, what really matters to them, what's in the way of those things. And then you've got a new currency of politics, a new currency of discussion. And I'll just say really quickly, we can get into this more if you want. In every community that I've worked in now over 40 years, whether it's in the United States, our work has spread also to 40 countries. It always started with a reframing of what mattered to people from a technical or political frame to a what matters to people frame. That unlocked our ability to get together and take action on things that actually matter to people and deliver things that relate to people's daily lives and what they're trying to create in the future. So I think that's where really good politicians know how to do this intuitively. Most politicians are not really good intuitive politicians. So that's one thing. The other thing is, can you listen? I can't tell you the number of politicians I've worked with and the number of people in community work that I do work with each and every day, who, when you start people start to talk with them, even if they're asking the right questions, they are processing stuff through preconceived notions. They're processing stuff through stereotypes. They're processing stuff through what feels comfortable to them because they don't want to, themselves don't want to feel uncomfortable. They don't want to hear that people don't trust them. They don't want to hear that people aren't acting on things that matter to them. And so we shut all of that out. Unbeknownst to ourselves, we shut it out. So we need to become more aware. We need to be more awake. We need to be more attuned if we're actually going to do what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, there's so many things I could go into on that, but I want to touch on a few things. So on that last point, during the training in a group that I'm working with the Indiana Rural Summit, we always say we try to create a safe space for those hard talk conversations, because we say on the sharp edges is where we find the truth. You know, that's if we lean into it and we really have those conversations when we're listening, not with our frame, but with somebody else's experience, and really pulling that layer. So that is such a valid point that I wanted to dive into. But what you were just talking about, because Antonia Scanton said a lot of what you were saying, and she talks about how do you message to that. And what she was talking about, which really aligns with what you're diving into here, is the contract is broken. The American contract is broken, is what and if you frame it like that, people can really understand when you start asking what your hopes and aspirations, they can see that the American dream that we were once promised of, if you work hard, if you have a job, if you pay for your bills, your children will be able to do a little better, if they can send them to school, etc. But now that's not happening. That aspirational part to dive into, to be able to create a future that you would like to lean into. So how do you talk to your communities and start to rebuild that? Because that's where the how and the work begins. Contract broken, needs to be an aspirational work. Now, how do we do that? How do we get our communities together, right?
Yeah. So happy to dive into sort of the practical nature of that, but there's something that sits beneath the practical part that I think your listeners might be interested in, because I agree that the contract is broken. I agree that our system is broken. And so I think at the core of all this is a crisis of belief. We no longer believe in our institutions. We don't believe in many of our political leaders and other leaders. I'm a person of faith. We don't believe in many of our faith institutions. We don't believe in a lot of civic organizations because they seem to be out for their own good at the expense of the common good. You know, social media is killing us. On and on it goes. And so I think one of the fundamental questions I think we have to ask ourselves is what diminishes belief and what engenders belief? And when you ask this, it leads to some of the things that you're getting at, Mary. I think when you ask people what diminishes belief, it's the stuff we've been talking about, unfulfilled promises, expectations that don't make sense, people just debating each other and arguing over stuff, pointing fingers and casting blame, on and on it goes. But when you ask people what engenders belief, I've been doing this over and over again throughout the country. I just did this, believe it or not, with 800 people where I was keynoting a conference. I gave a speech, but then I engaged them in a conversation about what diminishes your belief, what creates belief. And I got the same answers I get everywhere around the country. What creates belief is proof that something good is happening. What creates belief is that we fulfilled some promise we made. What creates belief is people seeing that, to your point about working at the edges, that while we can't solve every problem, we're at least dealing with what's in front of us. What creates belief is people seeing people working in different ways, right? We have a saying in our work, how we get the work done is as important as what we do. Right? That's really critical. What creates belief is small wins. So in communities, what moves communities forward, particularly now, but this has been true for the time I've been doing this work, is we have to first focus on what really matters to people and what we're for, not simply what we're against.
We say that all the time. Oh, love that phrase. Sorry.
Just going to echo something I said before, we have to reframe the debate from politics and problems to what matters to people. We have to turn outward toward one another. Otherwise, how the hell are we going to see each other and understand the context of our communities? That's a hard choice for people. Third, I think we've got to build together because people need to see proof that something different is happening, and importantly, that we're working together in different ways. We're not just getting together, we're working together. And I think, which I know is something you're both interested in, is we have to lift up the positive things that are beginning to happen because they're invisible to us. They're invisible. So we actually have a tool called Making the Invisible Visible that helps people see what they're creating together and the work that still remains, and how they can tell these stories in an authentic way without hyping what they've produced, but just being real about it. And that's what we're doing all across the country with communities. And I can tell you, the last point I'll make about this is, we can dig into, is the challenge before us is not about program strategies and initiatives. It's not.
Okay. Say more. Say more.
It's not. It's that we don't have, the biggest predictor of whether or not a community moves forward is its civic culture. The relationships we have, the norms we have, the stories we tell each other, the leaders we have, the organizations that bring us together to get work done, and so forth, how we talk with one another and have the hard conversations we need to have, and whether or not we follow through with actions. Those are the biggest predictor of whether or not communities move forward. And in addition to that, Josh, this goes back to what you were talking about with therapists. Let's just take youth issues, for example. Everyone thinks, oh, we need all these new programs, all these new strategies. Well, we're working with youth teams all across America, with youth and adults. And the adults always say, well, we need more mental health programs. And the kids always say, well, actually, we just need to be seen and heard. We want to know we're valued in this community. We want to know there's an adult who will walk beside us and offer us unconditional love. We want to know that people will respond to things we care about. We don't need more programs. We need connections. We need belonging, right? So I think we need to shift how we're thinking about some of this stuff.
Yeah, and society has shifted so much in so many different ways. I think that there have been, not to quote Bowling Alone, but I think there's so many organizations that used to hold places
Right.
just organically.
That's right.
That no longer do.
That's right.
And so now, because of that, now we're scrambling as an organization to force there to be those things. So maybe there used to be youth programs or clubs or youth group at church that everyone would go to, and now you don't really do that. So it's now you do need these mental programs because there is no one supporting these kids, because they're just sitting there bowling alone, although if there's a kid bowling alone, you should be concerned, because what teenager is bowling alone, but anyway, I think society has shifted so much that we have to take a look at what does our community look like, make those changes. And I think as candidates, as organizations, we have to say, what part do we play in this?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you, Josh. And, I think that one of the reasons why I'm so focused on civic culture is because over the years, it has atrophied. Over the years, these organizations that once served certain purposes have narrowed their focus because of their funding or metrics. Others that I hear over and over again in places, they've retreated from the public square and are just working at the edges because it's safer and they don't want to take the hits, right? It's too difficult. And, the leaders we once had, Mary, to your point, have become more increasingly focused on themselves and just winning as opposed to serving, and have been, they're locked into their political parties because that's how state capitals and city councils and Congress now works. It's how money gets raised. There's a whole bunch of stuff at work here. But And it's not that I would say that we don't need additional programs and initiatives and strategies. It's that we fall into the trap that believing just throwing money at stuff is going to solve problems, when if you face a crisis of belief, I believe that the change we need needs to begin in our local communities, because that's where we can actually see each other, hear each other, validate each other, accept each other, uphold our dignity, get some stuff done together,
Yeah.
create a sense of agency together. And not that that's going to solve all our problems, but it will restore our sense of belief and faith in one another and in this country, that we can come together and get things done, and then we can grow it from there. So if I were running for office, I would be careful about simply saying we need federal programs or state programs to rush into communities, because, Josh, to your point, those potentially unintentionally could continue to push out the work that communities need to do. So I would think about, how can we create things, if you want things from the federal level or the state level, that are in support of communities, that enable communities to build together, that ask people to revitalize and regenerate their local civic cultures in ways that help us move forward. That would be the agenda I would run on if I were running.
Well, and the reality is that doesn't work when you push for those federal things. I mean, we talked with the former Secretary of Ed here in Pennsylvania, and he talked about 2%, right, of funding comes from the federal level. So even if you push so hard, it's still 2%. So, like, who cares? Like, that's 2%. You still have to figure out, where are we coming from that local level? And I think that travel, like that concept, travels across the board to what you're saying, Rich, is you can push for federal, but it has to start local, or it's not going to work long term.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mary.
I talk about that with candidates a lot, and how to make the change we want to see in the community. I call it the bathtub method. You have to start at the bottom to fill your tub up. And then you're going to get the change you're going to see. I mean, because people can get the analogy, right? Why are we starting at the top and thinking you're going to fill the bucket? It's not going to happen. So if you're doing a workshop, if you're out in community and you've got a community that's in a crisis, because a lot of these communities are in crisis, they're losing funding, rural hospitals are closing. We had a bill almost go through our legislator that worked very hard to shut down 5 school districts. I mean, shut them down. That's the core of community. There was pushback and things shifted a little bit, but that bill is going to come back. So how do you start in your community to get folks together who might not agree in everything, but can find some commonality to start this process?
Yeah, look, this was the story in Reading, Pennsylvania, right? We started to work, that community was declared the poorest community in America 10 years ago. It was once almost all white. It is now 70% Latino, which makes it actually more diverse than it's ever been, because their folks come from 7 different countries, right? Different dialects, history, heritage, traditions. We were asked to work with that community at the height of culture wars on education, arguments over critical race theory, DEI, book banning, school boards being recalled, the whole shebang. And what unlocked that was having the community create an education agenda that was rooted in their aspirations for children and youth, and was not a report card on the schools, but was about what they wanted for their kids in terms of education and what they wanted for the community. Not one person we engaged, or one leader we engaged, talked about culture wars. They actually created a 9-point agenda that dealt with things like English as a second language, after-school activities, early childhood education, and others. And then to your question, like, let's say after-school activities, Reading's 100,000 people. All the people providing after-school stuff knew each other. But what they learned through this work was that they had an incredibly fragmented system that people could navigate. What they learned through this work was that a lot of things they were providing were not aligned with what youth and families needed or wanted. What they learned was that most of these programs were competing with one another, not serving the overall community. So in essence, you could say everything was great. They had lots of programs and lots of things, but it was misaligned. But here's the thing. The people of Reading who were working on that, we started with like 15 or 20 people around the table. Now it's 50. I was just in Reading a number of weeks ago when people hear this podcast. And those leaders and community members got together and realized that they needed to figure out what is it that people in the community really wanted, and that knowledge got put at the center of the table. When they did that, everyone realized we're not succeeding here. And we have a youth violence problem. And we have a youth violence problem in this community also.
Yep.
And so they began to have deep conversations about what is it that people need. They realized that there was redundancies and duplications, and people had to get in their lanes, which is hard to do because people had to give stuff up. They had to give stuff up. There's no free lunch here. They realized that instead of competing with each other, they should be creating a web around their kids that are focused on youth and families, not their programs. That's hard to do. That requires behavior changes and program changes. They realized that they didn't have programs in certain parts of town that were in most need of them. So they needed to reallocate and think about things differently. They realized that the school district for a generation had shut after-school programs out of buildings for a variety of good reasons. But those are the areas where people trusted. So they needed to get them back in. So they broke down the walls between the school and the community. Kids said, we don't want one-to-one mentoring. We want to be with other youth, but we want it supervised. We also want it tied to our academics. So they had to rejigger all those things. That's hard to do, but they did it. They're doing it. On and on. Kids said, we want to lead things, not just be told what to do. So they started taking over some of these efforts and creating new ways. On and on it goes. Now, here's the thing. Most of the things that they created did not cost another dime.
They just shifted and reframed their thinking.
Yes. Then, by doing that, they then began to attract other money. But they didn't start with money. They started with all these other things that I've mentioned. So when people tell me, one last thing that's I know important to you and your listeners, the school board and the school superintendent, we're just releasing a podcast on this now. The school superintendent who was there during this resisted this. She's said this publicly. She resisted the effort because she thought this was a report card on the schools. She realized this was about the community. And they became one of the best partners in all of this work. The school board as well. The mayor endorsed these efforts, city council members. So politicians came along. They didn't lead it, they came along. So when people tell me that as Americans, in this environment, we can't produce positive change for people, I think that's, people talk about hoaxes, made up news, fake news. That's made up news. It is possible for us to do this. We can do this. People are doing this.
Yeah.
People in Reading, Pennsylvania, of all places, are doing it.
What you're demonstrating is that flip. Again, it seems to be a theme we're talking about is reframing how we approach our problems because people think, I elected an official, that elected official, once they get in office, that's their job, they're going to fix it all for me. And then when that doesn't happen, they come disenfranchised, they lose trust, the institutions, and then we're in a downward spiral, right?
Exactly.
But now we have to what does democracy look like? And to answer that question is we are democracy. We are those who are in the communities that want to see the change. It's up to us. And we have the power.
Yes. Think about the school superintendent in Reading, because I think this sort of goes directly to your point. When we started, again, she says this on the podcast, she was insulted and taken aback by the initial report that was released by dealing with this community-led, community-driven agenda. She took it personally, and most people would, because you're like looking at this saying, holy smoke, they're telling me I failed, that we're failing. And then she said, I realized after a lot of conversations with me and other people that that's not at all what we were saying. We were saying that schools are important to education, but education, first and foremost, is a community responsibility. So again, for politicians who are just me focused, for politicians who think they're going to be the next savior riding in on the white horse or whatever color horse they want, saving the community and saving society. Again, what I would say to them is save us all, stay home. But here's the deal about the school superintendent, Dr. Murray, who I have incredible respect for, just incredible respect for. She came to the table, she worked with the community, and in doing so, the school district became much more effective at its role. The school district occupied a much stronger space in the community, not a diminished space, a stronger space. The school district became better known for actually helping people achieve their aspirations and desires, right? Not just kids, but families too. And so it's not a diminishment of a political leader's role. It's an enhancement of a political leader's role, if only they can get out of their own way.
Yeah, it's partnerships. I mean, I think you think about the CEO of a company. They cannot succeed without the right pillars and the right people in the right seats of the bus working together. And that's what it's not a competition. I mean, the best CEOs look as partners underneath. I want to talk to you about, because that is such a great example, and you talk about also working with young leaders. And what we see out there is our younger generation wants to participate. They're raising their hand. They're getting some flack. You don't have the experience. You don't know what you're doing. And then on the flip side, you have some leaders showing up feeling pushed aside, feeling they have to prove themselves in a big way. And sometimes, as I'm just being the messenger here, some people are saying the young people are showing up in the wrong way. Well, let's define the wrong way. Because you do have to build a coalition to be successful. And that is a leadership skill. It doesn't mean, so how you get into the fight is also, and how you show up to get what you want to see happen. So where we have a progressive movement happen, where we have our young people, whatever side of the issue you are on, there's a lot of emotion attached because people feel hurt and left out. Their communities are struggling. Their families are struggling. So how do you advise young leaders to show up in this space so they can see the change they want, but in a way that builds that coalition and creates that community that you mentioned that moves the needle?
Boy, we could spend an entire hour just unpacking that question.
I know it's a juicy one.
Because there's a lot, there's actually a lot of really good things embedded in your question. First of all, I just want to say that in every community that we're working, young people are saying, we want in. We want to be a part of creating something in our communities and in our lives, and they have been shut out. There are very few communities where they haven't been. In the communities that we're working with, they're working on making space. I think in order to do that, first of all, I think those of us who are old, it's like I was once 27, I was once 15, I'm now in my 60s, so I'm no longer one of these young leaders. And I think for those of us who have moved along in our careers and age, we have to remember that young people are bringing a certain passion with them, that they're bringing a certain set of lived experiences that are different than mine, that the world that they grew up in and are experiencing is so radically different than the one that I grew up in and experienced, radically, radically different, that they are impatient, that they have this emotion and passion. And I think if we want to make space, we older leaders, more seasoned leaders, have to be prepared for what people are bringing with them. That's true not just for young people, that's true when you go to a different part of town, right? So like if you want to do this work, you have to be prepared to hear things and experience things that may make you uncomfortable. I'm sorry. That's part of the price of admission. So that's one part. That's one part. The other thing I would say about for young people is you want to be heard. You want to be valued. So you do need to calibrate what you say. But there's a difference between calibrating what you say and negating what you think or feel. There's just a difference. And so I think the passion that people feel, we worked in Lexington, Kentucky, and young people kept telling us, when I bring issues to the table, if people believe I'm making waves, I get shut out immediately. So what I would say is, look, you have to say it in a way people can hear it, but I would not leave behind your concerns, your aspirations, what's really on your mind, because that's the perspective we need.
Mm-hmm.
That's the perspective we need. Last point on this. So that requires both courage and humility. I think when you put those two pieces together, I think people in my position have a responsibility to help mentor young people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think we're real good at that.
Agreed.
I think we think of mentoring as telling, as asking them to be in our image, of asking them to take on our tendencies. And I think that's not mentoring. That's not what it means to grow someone or grow something. Mentoring means helping to support and guide, but letting someone flourish and be their own person. And I think that is another part of this equation.
Yeah, that is such a powerful thing. I came to this work after working close to 9 years, almost 10 years from in and out with Lululemon. I started the Aviva brand, working with that team. And Lululemon, people wonder why people stay with a retail company for so long. And embedded in all that is a robust part of it is they really believe in giving their team members leadership and development. You work through all of the three different pillars. And the first pillar is leading self. And within that pillar, you learn all those skills about how do I communicate? How do I show up? What is self-responsibility to myself and to my teammates and to my community? And I feel that because we're living in a gig economy and, and because we're working from home, we're not gifting that because we should be gift and giving that to our next generation coming up. So they're able to show up in a much more powerful way. So their hopes and dreams and aspirations can be heard. Because I think you said it sometimes, going by the old cliche, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that is leadership. And we need that. So do you plan on doing more leadership development workshops for young people? Because boy, I'd love to send folks to those types of
Yeah,
opportunities so
please
they
do.
can really learn more about themselves and grow.
Yeah, so we have a school called the Harwood School where we teach people what it means to turn outward and how to create change that is inclusive of the community and reflects what matters to people in the context of the community. And to something you just mentioned about your private sector work, that what does it mean for us to show up? Like, how do you need to show up? How do you show up with intentionality? How do you show up with courage? How do you show up with humility? How do you make discernments and choices? And and we've done this for all sorts of leaders, including young people and political candidates. And so what I would say is we would love to partner with you to figure out how to do that. Look, I know you share this because of the work that you're doing. I think we need to and Josh, you mentioned this, I think we need to rebuild our civic culture in this country and invest in it. And that includes leaders of all types, of all ages, from all places.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of curious because you had a unique start to your career, and you're also kind of in a unique position now, both running the school and the work that you do and all of this. Like Gen Z and millennials, who are kind of our target, are started their professional careers in really awkward times.
Yes. Yes.
Gen Z like graduated school or are starting work in COVID. I graduated college in the end of 2019, December of 2019. So great time to get into the job market, just super awesome time, and that was true for a large portion of older Gen Z, and millennials, a lot of the younger millennials, even the older millennials graduated during the '08 crash. And so very awkward time. So we're seeing this trend now that we're a little separated where Gen Z are and now in this AI bubble era, Gen Z are having a hard time getting entry level jobs, even though they may be the same or more qualified than older generations were for entry level positions. And so I'm curious your perspective on that and how you would encourage those who often now, because of this, because they're like, well, I'm being replaced by AI, right? We see big tech companies who replaced thousands of employees. They're like, oh, Bank of America or like these big banks were like, oh, we replaced 400 of our employees with AI, you know? So they're like, I'm just going to do my own thing. And so your story is kind of unique, and you kind of did something not because of AI, but you were like, you saw a problem,
Mhm.
you saw all these questions, you're like, okay, I'm just going to answer these questions. So what is your encouragement, you're 35 plus years into it, looking back and looking at the era we're at now, what would you say to those Gen Z millennials who are looking to start their own thing? How would you encourage them, or what would you tell them not to do?
So most of my staff is Gen Z and millennials. My kids are as well. And I think the most important thing is to look within yourself about what really, I mean, this is sort of sounds trite, but I really do believe this. To look within yourself about what animates you, about what you value, about the things that really inform you and your life. And I think you should, and how that connects to something else beyond you. Like I always say, our work sits at the nexus between who you are as an individual and who you are as a civic actor. I have so many friends who are stuck in jobs that they never liked, that never fulfilled them, that never had a sense of purpose. They made a lot of money, maybe, but they're stuck. My own team is know what matters to you, know what animates you, know what moves you. And you might have to settle in the short run because you need to make ends meet. We all had to do that. I had to do that. But over time, don't lose that. You have one life. And we all have one life to live. And the question is, what choices do you want to make in terms of having that life have some sense of purpose and meaning? It could be that you're a mechanic because you like to take things apart and put them back together. And there's a real craft in that and meaning in that. So how you find that purpose and meaning, I think, is really important. How you seek to animate it is really important, and not giving up on it. We all have a light within us, I believe. Society has a way of diminishing it. And I think what's really important is to know what that light is within you and to hold tight to it and to try to make it glow as much as you possibly can. I know that sounds silly in a way, but I really do believe that's where I've ended up.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that we need younger folks. Like
Definitely do.
right, Mary, to your question earlier about young leaders, you know, the good ideas on my team are coming from people who are 30 years younger than me,
Hmm.
right? The energy that's coming on our team is coming from people 30 years younger than me. Um, the sense of belief that animates our work each and every day is coming from people 30 years younger than me. And, we need that. I need it. I
Yeah,
need
we
it.
do. We do. Well, Rich, this is such an amazing conversation. We're going to put some things in the show notes for the listeners to dive deeper. We talked a lot about stuff, a lot about this work is in the new Civic Path. What else would you like to leave us on a final note about that book, and why do you encourage people to dive in, and why this moment right now? Because you are really deep in the work. You're seeing what's happening in some of the most challenging communities across the country. And for me, after this conversation, what I'm taking away is it does give me hope because of, your title says it. There is a path forward.
Mhm.
We just have to roll up the sleeves and come together and in a community kind of way and redefine what our civic responsibility is. because we've lost that. And I'm looking for my phone because I put it away during this conversation, but a lot of it is the digital ecosystems we're living in right now. And we've hats off to, I think it was Denmark or Sweden, and Australia has it pretty strict. They are making social media and they're putting up those guardrails for our young
Yeah.
people. Hats down. I mean, hands down. I applaud that.
Yeah.
So, on that final question, on that final note, tell us a little bit more what's in the book and what are you excited about and what's the work taking, what are you taking away from this work?
Yeah, so I'm on this campaign for the new Civic Path going across the country. I've been going around now for a couple of years. We've been invited to places as divergent as Matt Gaetz' congressional district and Lauren Boebert's and Jim Jordan's to deeply blue places like Selma and Flint and everything in between. And wherever I go, I hear the same message, regardless of who people voted for, which is we can do better and be better as a country and as communities and as individuals. And people are hungry for a new path forward. They want an apolitical message from an apolitical messenger that's really clear right now, or a different message from political messengers, which is partly what you're trying to do, and which we need. And what I would say is that, again, going back to what we were just talking about in a way, so many of us feel like we have to surrender to what's happening in this country. So many of us just want to wallow in despair, though that's never produced anything positive over time. So many of us are retreating and hunkering down because we think that's the route forward. And what I would say is that we do have the ability to create the change that we want to create. It's going to have to start in our local communities because that's where we can get stuff done together. I do believe we need to get on a new civic path that's focused on not just talking, but building together and demonstrating proof that we can move forward and create a different momentum. I do believe that there is an agenda in America that people will work on across political lines. People are tired of the veering towards cruelty in our society. They want decency. They are tired of people's dignity being abridged and capricious and arbitrary acts. They want to uphold each other's dignity. There is a constellation of issues that people are working on in local communities, whether it's youth or seniors or mental health or what they call whole health or drug addiction and recovery. People can work on those across dividing lines because they matter to them in their daily lives. And we can engender an authentic sense of hope in this country if we get together and start doing this work. So what I would say to your listeners is, as you just said, Mary, yeah, there's a lot of bad shit happening in this country. No one likes it. At the same time, roll up your sleeves, join with others, start small. We can eventually go big. That's what they did in Reading and other places where we're working, because we all need systemic change, transformational change. And whatever you contribute, however big or small, it doesn't matter. What matters right now is that we all contribute and regain a sense of individual and shared agency and show that we can come together and restore our belief in ourselves and one another. That's the name of the game right now, I think.
That is so well said. Oh, what a great conversation. I don't know where to end with that because this is exactly what I tell my candidates to do. Because to take it from the candidate perspective, and then Josh, you can jump in, in order to get a vote, you have to build trust. In order to do that, people want to see you're working in your community and you're doing the work. So when you start here and you want to get someone's vote, trust, and investment when you're asking for dollars, that is, as like I say, half-ass backwards. You need to get in your community, roll up your sleeve, solve some problems, and then you can ask them for their vote, their investment, their time into your campaign. Mm-hmm. So Josh, I'll toss it back to you.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep you too long, Rich, but I want to follow up on that last piece if you've got some time. I'm curious because you talk about working across the aisle, and I know we're seeing a lot of stuff on the federal side where there's like a wall in between the aisle, right? Like there's very little. Well, I guess we saw the Epstein vote, but yeah. Other than that, we're seeing very little talking across the aisle, and we talk a lot about really leaning into your base side, right? And on the for-profit side, I work with clients all the time of like really lean into your core, like be really polarizing onto your like core mission of whatever it is. Now, you can go really toxic in that and go really too far, and we've seen candidates like the president who have gone too far into that. And I know you've talked about this in your work about how polarization is really bad, obviously, for our country and for civic engagement in general. But there's a reason it's done. It works really well. Like, if I go and I'm really polarizing about a topic, it can work really, really well to get core hateful or fearful people on my side. So how do we, like, as ethical people, work across the aisle or build trust or build healthy, uniting campaigns that actually work and build up our community when it's so easy and so effective to build polarizing campaigns?
Yeah, well, look, it works if you believe that fear is working. It works if you believe that despair means it's working. It works if you believe that simply pushing more polarization is working. It works if you believe that people losing hope, not only about this country, but their lives, is working. So if that's your definition of working, well, I think you really ought to examine what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the other thing I would say, which I say in speeches all the time, is who the hell gave you the right to act upon society in those ways? Who gave you the mandate to pull this kind of bullshit with people when, in fact, people are hungry? People don't have the mental health support they need. People don't have the schools they need. People don't feel safe in a lot of their communities. People don't feel as though they're seen and heard. Like, let's get real about this. So what I would say is, if you want to get real about it, then we're back to things we talked about, which is we got to focus really on what matters to people. We have to realize that we're not going to agree on everything. We're just not. That's part of human civilization. So let's get that utopian notion that we're all going to have a consensus about stuff out the door. We need common ground, not a consensus. We need just enough common ground to figure out what we can work on and do that and build our civic confidence to move forward. And then maybe we'll be able to tackle more intractable, seemingly intractable issues. We can't start with those. There's not enough belief and confidence and trust to get there. So let's start with what we can and build from there. So, at one level, our society, Mary, going back to the social media stuff you were mentioning, the context and environment we're living in is complex. It is messy. It's phenomenally noisy. It's tough to get anything done. You can't even get people's attention in this world, right? But what I would say is, if you believe your role is simply to accentuate all those problems, then my response to you is get the hell out of the way. And let's get some folks who want to get some stuff done. And let's build better lives for people. And let's give people a greater sense of hope. And let's build a country that we can be proud of again.